llegan los invitados internacionales. Un poquito más adelante, ¿queréis? ¿Sí? Vale. Una última, antes de empezar, una última pregunta a los técnicos. ¿Los pies de micro van a estar aquí delante? ¿No? Vale. Vale, perfecto. No, está bien. Está bien.
Hola.
Okay.
Hola.
Good
¿Se oye? Sí.
Good afternoon.
Hola, buenos días y bueno, muchas gracias por estar aquí.
And thank you for being
Hoy
here
es un
today.
día muy especial para el SEOC,
Today
porque
is a
por
very
fin
special day for
tenemos a
us
VAL del
8
Omar con
because
nosotros.
finally we have
Y
VAL
también
del Omar
tenemos,
with
la
us.
autoridad local
And we also have the local authorities here today. We have a representative of the A Coruña's local authorities, Juan Ignacio Borrego, so I hand over the floor to him. Today we're going to have a very fruitful and day that we're going to enjoy a lot. Hello, good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to a city that is yours and where nobody is a foreigner, nobody is alien in this city. I would like to also greet the representatives of the world of cinema that have gathered here today to talk about, among other things, VAL del Omar, and also to hold this festival. And we are thankful to the cultural authorities, to the Institute, Cervantes Institute, for sharing this with us here in A Coruña. It's the 12th edition. It's a shame we can have more people because we have a lot of people who have traveled to Coruña to try and enjoy this festival. And I hope that to the extent possible they are able to enjoy not only the festival but the city of A Coruña, also the world of audiovisual. The audiovisual world is a growing thing here in A Coruña. The creative concept, the avant-garde concept, and also the technical and talent concept. I have the honor to represent the local authorities here today, and we have to say that we have committed to the world of audiovisual and also the festival, the S8 festival. This is a city where light, glass is very important, has a great presence, and also light is very important for cinema, and also the shadows. And we are moving out of a time of shadows, and we hope that the next edition of this festival is going to be much more crowded, that we are able to hold it face-to-face, and that we can gather here today in a new situation where we all are very healthy and very well. So I hope that this festival is fantastic, and I just would like to convey to you that we are always here for you, and we thank you for holding this in A Coruña. So enjoy the festival.
Bueno, buenos días a todos.
Good afternoon to all of you. As Anna has already said, this is a very special day for us. What I would like to do especially is to thank you for your support, because you are making this festival possible, especially in this moment in time where we are a little bit lost. We weren't sure whether we're going to be able to do this or not, but I can assure you that the effort that's been made by the festival to bring people here today, to have a face-to-face presence of guests and audience, has been great. And the other day I was talking to some other representative of another festival, which is something like going back to the barricades, to the front line. So I would like to thank you for participating, and this big amount of audience that we have had is something that fills us with pride and joy. And I would like to apologize for the fact that we cannot hold and host all the people who wanted to attend this. And this afternoon we're going to an event which is going to seat only 25 people in a room that has 105 seats. It's a bit painful to have to do it like this, but in any case, this shows that we are still there and we are working with and putting a lot of effort in bringing this project forward. This project that has been shaped here in A Coruña, and something that's going to be touring the world in the next few years. And we're going to continue exerting our greatest efforts and giving our greatest support to this festival. And we've always said this and done this since the inception of this festival. We've had, if there is a real motivation for this festival, that is that we have always thought that, we would like to do the festival that VAL del Omar would like to do. That is the motivation behind S8. And we've shared this spirit with all of you who have gathered in this festival in previous editions, because we remember VAL del Omar and we thank him for the legacy that he's left us as lovers of cinema, that we are passionate for cinema that we are. I'd like to thank all the sponsors and all the organizers, and especially the VAL del Omar archive and Piluca Vaquero for their work, their intense work that you are conducting. I would like to personally thank also Gonzalo Saez de Buruaga for having devoted your life to actually disseminate the passion that you actually inherited from VAL del Omar. And thank you for that support, that energy that VAL del Omar felt for cinema and his conception of cinema, because I think that living, experiencing cinema is an important part of what we want, the message that we want to send across in this festival. I'd like to thank also our friend Victor Berlin. He has devoted a lot of time to research. He is a very important person in terms of, making a more contemporary, giving a more contemporary generation perspective about the work and life of VAL del Omar. To those of you who are watching us live through live stream, and to those of you who are here today, face to face, I have to tell you that we have exerted a great effort thanks to the cooperation with the VAL del Omar archive, with Victor Berlin. We tried to make a very dynamic program just to contribute that special action to send the message that is contained in the work of VAL del Omar. I hope you enjoy this day. And, it's like a dream come true, really. I've always said that every edition was about conquering utopia. Maybe this is one of the utopias that we've been able to conquer that makes us more proud, which is sharing with you the life and work of somebody who has to be a lighthouse of cinema as something with the future. I would like to personally thank José Manuel Gómez, the person responsible for cinema and cultural action at his organization, for trusting our festival to hold this event on VAL del Omar, and we are speechless, really. You have read our minds. A few years ago in Madrid, he asked me about the performances that we had in the festival and other activities, but we were finding inspiration in VAL del Omar, and we created the spaces in the festival, and now you are fostering and promoting these and disseminating this, so thank you very much. And I would like to now hand over the floor to José Manuel. Can you hear me? Good afternoon to all of you. This is a very, Acción Cultural Española has been wanting to hold this for a long time. We've been trying to do this for 3-4 years now. I had the opportunity to be with Piluca in the Cali Cinema Festival in Colombia, because Luis Ospina was very interested in actually bringing the triptych there, and in a place that was not easy for screening. We saw that there was a lot of power there, a lot of energy, and other people who were passionate about this and interested in this. So we decided that we had to do something that was much greater, much more interesting, much more spectacular. So I was clear about the fact that the venue for that was actually S8. I've been cooperating with Angel and Anna for a long time now, and we are clear about the fact that if we had to start in a place, that place was S8, because we had all the requisites, and it was totally natural for us to do it here. So don't thank me. I am the one who thanks you, Victor, Piluca, Gonzalo, for your generosity. And it's a project that we want to give a continuity to. We have two other venues, which are Frankfurt in Germany and Lyon in France. And I hope that, this is going to continue growing, because it deserves to grow. It's worth that it grows. It's a project worth promoting and fostering and supporting. And I think that's unstoppable right now. So let's just enjoy it, because it's shocking. It's amazing, you see, to have the opportunity to do this. So just, again, thank you for starting this and for all the work all the work and effort you've put into this project. Sorry, I can't translate now because I can hear the microphone. It's not... Maybe the people in the room can hear him, but I can't hear him, so I can't provide the translations. My apologies to you for that. Okay, I just wanted to cast some light on the fact that one of the most important works in the city, such as Sevilla, and I'm going back to 2018, let me just tell you that we have built the concept of the mirroring program, the cinema as an element. I'd like to thank Elena Duca, because she is the mind behind this, and she's a person who's worked a lot on the legacy of Val del Omar. She's going to be coordinating this session, and I want to thank her for, being so insightful and filling the room with light. Can you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for being here today. Of course, thank you to our guest speakers today. Within the framework of this project that just Ana and Angel have been talking about, regarding the program that we have set up, regarding the triptych of Val del Omar, we wanted to set up a mirroring program with filmmakers, avant-gardists, and young filmmakers who are actually feeding on the legacy of Val del Omar, and we have integrated this into the elements of the triptych. The program of the festival is also, related to Val del Omar, because we are devoting one of the online programs to something that's very specific, which I'm very interested about, which is the Plat Lab by Val del Omar. We have the online program, and I recommend you to go and have a look at this, because it's really interesting. So we thought that beyond presenting sessions, it was actually interesting to convene this lecture or this debate and to organize this, because Val del Omar is a great character and personality. Difficult to explain what he was in a few words. So we wanted to just bring some biographical context to these and some of the landmarks of Val del Omar's concepts and thoughts, just for us to understand what all of this is, because the triptych is a filmmaking work that is impressive in itself, and just watching the triptych is some sort of an initiation to many people, to whoever watches that. It's been for me and for many of us here today. It's the tip of the iceberg of a school of thought that is disseminating all around the place. So to talk about this, we have invited a number of people who have been very important when it comes to disseminating the legacy of Val del Omar. Or maybe they've been key, they've been crucial, they've been vital. And let me just introduce you to an audience here today. Here today with us is Piluca Baquera, who is the director of the VAL DEL OMAR archive. She is a producer and a professor, but apart from that, she's been working for 20 years now on the dissemination of this legacy in an effort that is never-ending. We're never going to be able to disseminate the legacy work and life of VAL DEL OMAR well, so this is something that we need to pass on to the next generations. So Piluca has brought us a very special present that is here with me, and they're going to see it operating soon. And we're going to explain to you what it means and what this actually is. So we're very thankful and very happy to have you here today. And, for the fact that you, on top of that, are bringing presents. And then we have Gonzalo Sáenz de Buruaga, who is a person who met VAL DEL OMAR. He was a friend of his. He was very interested in his work, and he became a very important person also in terms of supporting that work and bringing it into context, and also in compiling a number of materials that have been very important when it comes to understanding the work of VAL DEL OMAR. And in spite the fact that Gonzalo is an economist, his life somehow has been connected very intensely to the dissemination of the legacy of VAL DEL OMAR. And, I am speechless again. I can just thank you so much for all that work and effort, Gonzalo. And then with here today with us, Victor Berlin, who is also a film editor, a filmmaker, a professor. And we thought it was interesting to invite him here today because there is some, similarities with our position when it comes to discovering VAL DEL OMAR, because we're discovering him, analyzing him within the framework of a context of experimental cinema, within the framework of, the perspective of a different generation also. And this helps us to bring a different perspective to this work. Victor has a PhD dissertation where he has analyzed the correlation between the expressive elements of VAL DEL OMAR work and the technical elements that, as we're going to see here today, are two complementary elements. And he has made a very comprehensive analysis of the triptych in this sense. So I would like to start by giving you some context of the biography of VAL DEL OMAR. He was born in Granada in 1904. And since he was very young, he started becoming interested in cinema. And I think he was able to realize very soon that there was a great potential in cinema. You see, we need to bear in mind that when VAL DEL OMAR was born, cinema had been just invented just 10 years ago. So when he was very young, he went to Paris and he came into contact with Master Dervier, Louis Deluc, French Impressionism. And he then came back to Spain and he had some visions already about what cinema should be. And he understood something that in 1928, we have that landmark of the interview for the La Pantalla magazine. He understood something that then would become very popular through a number of characters of experimental cinema in the 60s, which is expanded cinema. But in 1928, VAL DEL OMAR realized already that cinema was an experiential art that had a great potential, and that the situation of screening or exhibition could be expanded in many different ways. And starting from that point in time, all of his life was actually devoted to that work. So, as I have already said, we have this materials, this documentation that tells us that VAL DEL OMAR realized about the existence of this potential. And then Cristóbal Simancas wrote a paper for Espectáculo magazine or the publication Espectáculo. And in the 1940s, he was devoted to experiments also related to acoustics and radio. and in a way he contributed to shape what was called concrete music afterwards. And in the 1950s, he started to create the elementary triptych of Spain, that fundamental work of his that we're going to analyze here today. And we're going to analyze its links to all that set of ideas regarding the power of cinema, mysticism, conceived beyond religions, poetry, and that power to actually move that people, that and generate emotions that cinema has. We have called this an aprojimación, an approximation, because this word that he invented involves something that is very important, which is the fact that there is a belief that cinema or art is an element that can actually contribute to improve society and that can move people in such a deep way, such an intense way that can help expand the world in a very special way. So, also, Val del Omar created some more things, inventions, apart from filming and inventing things related to cinema. He also wrote, and he wrote poetry. He did collage, and he was an idealistic person. He tried to establish a contact, a connection with the institutions in an attempt to alert them about everything that can be done to change the world. And at the end of the day, he actually flourished and thrived in a place like Spain, which back then was a very, adverse place. And unlike other artists who have actually developed in a more cosmopolitan context, Val del Omar reached and drew all these conclusions in solitude, to put it like that. And this is something that is, amazing in a way, the fact that he was able to develop all of these conclusions in such a context, such as the Spain of his time. I would like to start with one of the ideas of Val del Omar that was created in the 1930s. Val del Omar participated in the pedagogical missions, the misiones pedagógicas. To those of you who come from abroad, this was an initiative of the Spanish Republic to bring culture to the more remote parts of Spain. Val del Omar took part in that initiative, in particular in the area of cinema, of these pedagogical missions. And there is some pictures of the arrival of cinema to very remote villages in Spain, and it shows that commotion that Val del Omar spoke about. So I would like to start by talking maybe with Gonzalo and asking him to tell us about this participation of Val del Omar in the pedagogical missions and educational missions, and about a concept which is kinesthetic pedagogy. And we have all these words that Val del Omar used, like this one. So maybe Gonzalo can tell us a little bit about this first stage of Val del Omar's life. Well, maybe not the first stage, maybe the second stage, to be more precise, because the first stage is when... Can you hear me properly? Because I've got this iron mask on me, and well... and maybe my voice, which is probably not suitable for the radio, but I'll try. So there was the first stage, in any case. There was prior to that, in the solitude, in the loneliness of the Alpujarras in Andalusia, in rural Andalusia, and after totally destroying his first and only narrative film with a title which was in a remote place of Andalusia, that was sponsored by his grandmother because his parents had divorced, which was already something extraordinary in the sad Spain of the 1920s. So he lived with his grandmother, and he was called Pepito by his grandmother, just like short form for his name, Jose, like a family name for that. And it was his only and favorite grandson. He paid his trip to Paris he went to Paris before Buñuel, actually, and he became friends with Marcel Hermier, with Louis Deluc, with Germain Dulac, and he actually experienced passion for cinema there and felt passion. And many other passions also, for example, cars. It is funny that Val del Omar died just like Gaudí in a car crash. Gaudí was killed in a city, and Val del Omar died in the M30, which is a road around, a highway around Madrid. So Val del Omar gets this first intuition after the failure of In un rincón de Andalucía, in a remote place of Andalucía, that first film of his, and he wants to do something that is totally his. So in 1928, when he was 24, he started in the La Pantalla magazine, he started talking about the screen, the concave screen. He started talking about the diaphonic sound. I don't remember if he mentions that back then, but he did mention something that you have already mentioned here, which is aprojimación, approximation, what he called a variable angle objective, or after 1943, zoom, which was patented by the American company Zoom. So why did why did Val del Omar create Zoom already in 1934? We've got documents that can be seen in the movie Fiestas Cristianas, Fiestas Profanas, much before Zoom existed, which was patented in 1943, as I have already said. So Val del Omar created these through this aprojimación, this approximation. He was a man of Granada, subjugated by the magic of Alhambra, and he wanted to, well, 400 meters away from the Alhambra in Granada, there is a quarter, the Albaicín, which used to be a very backward and poor quarter. It is a touristic area today, and it used to be populated by gypsies and poor people. So he wanted to bring these people closer to the Alhambra, and he did it with this variable angle objective. So regrettably, we don't have a documented experience of that effort or registry of that effort, but we do get that some years later in the fields of Cartagena, an amazing image shocking image of windmills that are spinning, and at that simultaneously Zoom gets into the windmill, and this happened 10 years before Zoom actually patented Zoom. So this is the first stage of Val del Omar, and then is the stage of the missions, the pedagogical missions, the educational missions. So he left Granada, he went to Madrid, and he had a great admiration. He admired one of the great educationalists of the 1920s and the Spanish Republic, Bartolomé Cosío, who was from the region of La Rioja in the north of Spain, although he came originally from Cantabria, which is to the northwest of Spain, and he was the founder of the Misiones Pedagógicas, the pedagogical missions. And probably due to a suggestion by García Lorca, he joined this multidisciplinary team, which was the pedagogical mission. So what did Val del Omar do in the missions? He did all type of things. He could do anything, really. He could drive a truck or a van. That can be seen in some of the documentaries about that initiative, for example, in Estampas, dating back to 1932. So he drove a van or a truck, and he could also fix the electricity system, or he could set up some equipment in villages with no electricity. He also intervened in the pictures that would be taken. He also engaged in dialogue in the puppet show with his Galician friend, Rafael Dieste, great writer, great philosopher. in the puppet show. He would also, in front of the pictures by Ramon Gaya, he would explain the meaning of these pictures, these paintings to the public. So he would do anything. He was like an orchestra man. So back then, according to what he said, he did 40 documentaries. Maybe he was exaggerating. Val del Omar was not a quantitative economist, to put it like that. Maybe it was 20, or maybe it was 40, but maybe not. But there must have been a lot, because otherwise you cannot explain the technical power and poetical power that you can see in his first film, which is Agua Espejo, Water Mirror. It is impossible to have an artist creating his first work like that without a previous experience. So this shows that his experience was also already, at that time, a long experience, broad experience. Saibro did create a lot of documentaries back then. And we're ready to know what happened with those documentaries. As I have already said many times in all the fora that have the occasion to join, people are very pessimistic in this country, in Spain. They just go something like, well, the pedagogical missions of the Republic. When Francoism started, they burned everything. They destroyed everything. All the work by the pedagogical missions was destroyed, according to that, in a building that Peluca knows very well, because she just lived opposite that building. And so it was a very efficient and they would have been a very efficient job. But Francoism was mainly characterized by inefficiency. So it was not only the work of Valdemoral, but also other intellectuals. All the paintings, all the books, I don't think that can be banned, all of it. There has to be somebody who is in charge of that nonsense and that tragedy. And that is what we are ready to actually find with the cooperation of the Reina Sofia Museum of Madrid. I am ready to support with all my energy the work to actually know what happened with that. What's the actual credibility of that alleged destruction of material? We have conducted some paperwork and research about the fact that Juan Ramón Jiménez, the Andalusian poet that was very admired by Val del Omar, brought some of these films to Puerto Rico. And in Puerto Rico, I have made some research 25 years ago. I started this process. We sent some letters. We sent some emails. And there is no record of the existence of that. There was some other international perspective that many of these films ended up in the Kodak Rochester's registry in New York, in the state of New York, because Kodak actually would give the film, the raw film, for free, as long as they would be sent the final product. Our friend Jordana Mendelsohn, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania and working in New York at the moment, also did some research, but was also not fruitful. And maybe we should have done something, and this quite urgent, at least for me, because I'm becoming, you see, getting older. So we have to go to the Spanish archives also and do a search there. There are a lot of secret archives in Spain still today. This is unacceptable. A lot of military and civil archives exist to this day. My great friend Angel Viñas, who has done research on the consequences of Francoism and the Civil War, had to use foreign archives in Belgium, in France, in Germany, and the UK. However, Spanish archives are still not open, so we have to do that. We have to do that. Well, this is, we could talk a lot about these archives. We know about this too, because when it comes to programming and exhibits and films, you need to find them first. But why don't we continue analyzing the legacy that we do know about Val del Omar? And in this regard, well, we've been talking about kinesthetic pedagogy, which is similar to that approximation of approach of Val del Omar regarding how cinema can become a tool for educating and to generate some more transcendental feeling in the people who come in contact with it. So maybe we can move on to something that we're very interested about also, and that maybe Piluca can tell us about wisely, which is the idea of mechanistic and how this is present in the work of Val del Omar. If you can explain to us what the mysticism is and how it is set up and this and shaped in the work of Val del Omar. Well, as you have said, he was an inventor, and maybe his most important characteristic is that as an artist, you can separate the creative part from the technical part. His inventions, they were always aimed at satisfying a creative need, something that he wanted to do, and since it was not invented, he was the one inventing it. So this happens with diaphonic sound in Agua Espejo Granadino, or with the Foncastilla, where the writings of Juan de Junio and Berruguetti become alive, thanks to this technique, and also the panoramic overloading of the image that was presented in the Festival of Cannes, and Gonzalo actually attended that screening. Well, you see, everything becomes embedded in the movie, the walls, the ceiling. So he started forging a philosophy that maybe after 1963, Maria Jose and Gonzalo gave him the lab as a present in the basement of the, or in the premises of the Rua de Calle de Arosa, the Arosa Street. And he called that PLAT, Pictoluminous Audio Tactile. And, well, we're trying to make it available or open soon. There's going to be a space in the ground floor of the museum. So he coined that term that appears in all the collage that he did in the 1970s and the beginning of the 80s, which is the mecamistica, or the mechamysticism. He was a very mystic person. One of the people who influenced him the most was Manuel Bartolomé Cosío, also Manuel de Falla, the composer, the musician, who is a neighbor of his in Granada. And one of his references also is San Juan de la Cruz. So this mysticism is more Sufi, that Catholic is about that component of guilt, that mixture of ethnology and technology was called by him, was coined by him as mysticism. So this was developed by him in that stage of his life and can be seen in his films. Some of them are going to be available in the digital program of this festival. And also his collage, which are amazing and are well, the fruit of his work as a technician, as an artist. He used to define himself as cinemista, which is a mixture of alchemist and filmmaker, in Spanish at least. So he was some sort of an alchemist filmmaker, or so he called himself. This afternoon, we're going to be able to see the triptych, the tríptico, which was made in the 50s. And then, he was not edited completely by VAL DEL OMAR, but also by Javier Mortalvo. And this is like a trip or like a tour around Spain, starting in Alhambra in Granada with water as an element, then continues in Castile with the writings of Juan de Juni and fire as an element, and it ends in Galicia with the land, the earth as an element. So, taking advantage of the fact that we have Victor here today with us, he has conducted a very deep analysis on the expressive elements in relation to the technical elements. I would like to ask him to do an analysis and to explain to us what the expressive element and the technical advance that can be, assigned to each movie, because in Agua Espejo and then, well, fire, water, earth. Okay, yes, I think that one of the most interesting issues regarding VAL DEL OMAR is the richness of his thought and his philosophy, both the technical and applied points of view. We were talking about the pedagogical missions, because there, in that initiative, he saw the experience of the audience when they face the cinema for the first time. It's an ecstatic experience, and it was recorded by his film camera, by his camera, and this is something that he's going to try and reproduce throughout over the next few years, the following few decades, with his utopias. This is a very rich time of his life, because missions were a twofold initiative. They were trying to bring culture closer to the rural areas, and also the other way around, you see, a feedback from a feedback loop of some sort. Then we had the Civil War, and this, actually interrupted that process, that cultural process, and the end of the Civil War. At the end of the Civil War, VAL DEL OMAR was in Valencia with his wife, María Luisa Santos, who had diabetes, and they have two children, and then he gives up in a way. He had cooperated already in bringing the El Prado paintings to Valencia, but back then he surrenders, gives up, and the Franco regime thinks that all his experience and knowledge could be evil, or could be useful for evil plans. So in less than a decade, he realizes about the positive uses of a technology and the negative uses also that technology may have. So he is commissioned with creating the polyphonic circuit of Valencia, which is what he called a machine to soil brains. You see a number of loudspeakers in the town sending messages for the population to actually modify their ideology. We had things about bullfighting, about religious issues, about masses. So from that moment, he is shocked in a way. He realizes what needs to be done and what needs to be not done. So he is like... you need to think about the fact that at the time, all these terms, global village, mass media, start to be coined. So that vision that he had about technology is of fundamental importance, because it's going to become later on an element that's going to be inherent to his cinema experiences and his devices. And he realizes that with the conventional resources that he has, he's got not enough. When it comes to expressing what he wants to express, he develops techniques before films. In Agua Espejo Granadino, the most characteristic technique used is diaphonic sound, just like sound here works as some sort of dialogue. He wanted a shock, some sort of a shock to be created. He had a loudspeaker behind the screen and another one at the back of the room, so they were aimed at creating some sort of sound shock in the audience, some sort of total art concept, as some Wagnerian concept, just how to create this type of cinema experience that hits you in many different levels. If you remember the images of La Colmena, El Espíritu La Colmena, he was trying to create a similar feeling. So he was sort of recreating that universe. I was talking about Agua Espejo Granadino. Here is where diaphonic sound appears. So back then, 1950s, the beginning of that decade, he was working in Radio Nacional de España, the national Spanish radio. He founded the Electroacoustics Lab. He started experience with concrete music. And later, as you have, well, just told us about what you've been preparing in Valladolid. Sorry, the sound is not getting to the interpreter's booth right now, so I can't provide a translation. Vale. Okay, it's something that we can actually touch. It's something that is tangible, something that was already present in Egyptian art and a number of references that he was taking from the past. And then we have Cariño Galaico, Galician affection. We have to say that the elementary triptych of Spain is not a work that is conceived as such from the beginning, but an idea that he started to cherish at the end of his life, the last years of the Plat Lab. And Gonzalo was a sponsor of Plat, not just friend of VAL DEL OMAR. And he started cherishing the idea of trying to unify the most important part of his work, the better known part of his work. There is a part of his work where he enters some sort of a work in progress process, and when he starts trying to finish his works. So he starts the Galician film, and he thinks that by uniting the three pieces, he could have create an experience that can be enjoyed for a long time. So he has been trying to finish the Galician film. He can't find the proper tone for it, and it's probably a film and not just about, well, I mean, not because of Galicia, but because of himself. It's darker. It's a very powerful, vital expression. So we have to analyze this very prudently, because this is something that was not edited by the author. It is true that, well, a part of that is based on an editing list that he had worked with before, and Javier, Rafael Codesal, and helped with this, and there were some mute parts of this movie because we didn't have the sound annotations. So these are the concluded works. There are many more devices here. He started working with cinematographic formats like by standard 55 because couldn't be applied because it was not profitable for the authorities and their censorship systems when they had to cut part of the film. So he invested a lot of energy. He put a lot of energy, 10, 15 years, visiting institutions and trying to make these inventions as standard. So it was a bit of a bitter struggle for him, because he thinks that he didn't manage to actually achieve those goals. But it's a hybrid struggle also, because it's always present in those two fields that were not separated that much for him. So he was really a poet from my point of view. So he didn't care about having a machine or maybe a futuristic thing such as the vehicles or cars, you know what I mean? We have talked about technique, and maybe we should also say that within the framework of this elementary triptych of Spain, and you will be able to see this today if you have the opportunity to watch it. So the movie shows all that optical work about shaping images, you see slowing it down, using positive, negative film, doing what Victor said about tactile vision, which is some sort of a pulsated light system that is used when filming in order to create some sort of a relief effect, which is quite overwhelming. So these techniques that he used, some of them have been used also by us as to name our expanded cinema session, and that has been also reproduced in the exhibitions that were set up in the Centro Guerrero, the José Guerrero Center and the Reina Sofia Museum, as Piluca said about the screening, outside screening, and the extrafoveal vision, what you can see laterally, and it was filled with productions of patterns and images that are a little bit more abstract. So these, you see, at the end of the day, we have the technique, we have that expressive component and formal component in cinema, but then all the underlying ideas. So Gonzalo experienced hand in hand with Val del Omar the dissemination of the triptych in Cannes, and then he became a good friend of Val del Omar. So we'd like to know how, in terms of ideas, the triptych is actually created. How did he come to the idea of doing it? How did he articulate this in the way he did? What was the idea behind, you see, traveling around Spain through elements? Well, as Victor said, the idea behind the triptych is actually not the original idea, dating back to the moment when Val del Omar starts working in 1953 on Agua Espejo. This is when he realized, or had the intuition, that regarding the ambition for a cinema show to last for an hour, there had to be some sort of greater time or time interval. There is a lot of nonsense in cinema. I'm not going to, you see, skip the word because I am an independent person, luckily. And one of this nonsense is the word short film. Val del Omar, which had a greater influence of music than by cinema, I composed a piece by Mozart that is short. Is it called a short work? In Wagner, you got long works, which are probably the worst. Shostakovich composed long works. So Val del Omar is somebody that we need to think about from the point of view that cinema was destroyed by his first movie, you see, in Un Rincón de Andalucía, in a remote place of Andalucía. So he was friends with Rafael Gil, with Gonzalo Méndez Pidal, some people back then who took part in the pedagogical missions. He wasn't interested in cinema. I don't remember having watched more than 2 films with him. 2001 by Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick, and Wells, Citizen Kane. So when I watched Kubrick's film, I had already watched Tarkovsky's Polaris. And I said that you needed to watch both just to analyze the optimistic and the pessimistic powers, American and Russian. Unluckily, we didn't have the opportunity to watch this film together, but conventional narrative filming or movies were not interesting for Val del Omar. He was interested in a different thing. So in this pretentious world, you had to, you see, make ends meet and pay for the bills. So you have to find the instruments necessary for having an hour-long show for people to get attracted, feel attracted by this. But this is an idea that started to appear in his final years when he did whatever he liked, because we gave him an apartment just next door to ours, and also the lab in the Arosa Island street, which has a Galician name, by the way. It's still there, part of his lab. The instrument that we haven't taken to the museum. This is where Val del Omar lived in the last 5 years of his life. And he just did what he wanted there. He was his small bourgeoisie stage of his life, because he could devote all his time to doing whatever he liked. And he had his fan base, to put it like that, his admirers, who would go to talk to him and talk about a lot of different things, philosophy, politics, art. So it was some sort of a Madrid prophet, or Andalusian Madrid prophet. So this is where the idea about making the triptych actually arises. And for the last 2 years, I've been trying to create a text regarding why Val del Omar did not finish Cariño Galaico, or Galician Affection. And I'm still reading works that have not been published yet by him, his letters to his father, his letters to his daughter, the letters that he wrote to me, which were not many, just to try and find out why he didn't finish Galician Affection, Cariño Galaico. There was one day when I had a conversation when the Centre Pompidou in Paris is going to be inaugurated, or an exhibition we're going to inaugurate it there regarding experimental cinema in Spain, and he was going to be present, his work was going to be present, and he told me that he couldn't do it because it was a tragedy, and this was 1981, and I said to him, the greatest tragedy is what the Tejero colonel has done with this coup d'etat attempt in Spain. So he was very impressed by this Colonel Tejero story. He brought memories of the Civil War, and everybody was very terrorized about that, of course, especially those who have gone through, had experienced that civil, uncivil, really, war. And I said to him, that is a tragedy. So that comment of mine is something that he actually captured in the sound, and he mixed in a magisterial way with a blasphemy of some writing from the 17th century, saying, we declare war on heaven and earth. So he was just like a total anarchist. He says, I don't want to know anything about this. I want to forget about this. So he left his film unfinished. And probably, and sorry for the interruption, we can say that my first intuition, what I would say is that Val del Omar lost his religious, not his faith. He lost his faith because his religious faith had been lost many years ago. So he lost his faith in cinema. He created in 1935 an association to us called Those Who Believe in Cinema. He didn't believe in the Republic. He believed in cinema, and also in his friend Warlamenko here, who was going to be president of the Republic, but he said, no, I'm too old for this, to preside over anything. So, but Val del Omar, in the last stage of his life, he just wanted to forget about everything, or everything really, and he left this unfinished. So this is a text that I am not able to finish either. I've been trying to complete it for the last 2 years. Maybe some of you can help me with that. So it's some sort of a curse, you know. The unfinishment of the uncompletedness of Val del Omar is leading me to incompleteness also. There are more folders, there are more papers every day in my house, and I can't complete it, I can't finish it. And well, Rosa has been a witness to this. This is probably because in the last stage of his life, Val del Omar is a bit bitter, is a bit sad because he didn't meet some of the goals of his life. But it's not about sadness. I wouldn't say sad, you know. Those were the happiest years of his life. It's some sort of a Benjamin Button relationship because, or Benjamin Button experience. Maria Jose and I didn't have any children, so his close friends had adopted. A close friend had, from New York, Barbara Diaz-Canedo, who is married to a Madrid architect. They adopted a child, a little girl, and that was a horrible experience. She was a wild little girl. But for some other friend, the adoption went really well. So I read all the books about adoption, in Swiss books, American books. I spent a year about adopting or not adopting. I didn't draw any conclusion. And one fine day, Maria Jose said to me, but we already have 2 children, Val del Omar and Maria Luisa. That was true financially because they depended on us financially, and we had given a lab and an apartment to Val del Omar. So for him, these were happy years, and it was, you see, stoicism was a part of his life, and he had a girlfriend. Who was actually 50 years younger than him. And she worked in the Institute of Statistics, so this was really, actually, well, strange for Val del Omar. Or you wouldn't expect that from him. And the mother of that girl didn't want her to actually marry Val del Omar because he could be his father or his grandfather. So, could we say that his love life or passionate life was actually a failure? Not really. Well, no, that's not what I was saying. At the last stage of his life, he was some sort of a precursor of some Eastern ideas. And you see, Salvador Paniga. Yeah, he was a friend of mine, and I met him in Pals with Vázquez Montalbán, Portabella, all these people, Ricardo Bofill, the architect. So we became really good friends, and we were going to buy a musical instrument in London, and that I wanted to play, but then I realized that it was really difficult to play this instrument, this contrabass. And, well, I still keep some books that are very interesting regarding all of this. And I also keep a very important book by Federico García Lorca, but not the García Lorca we know. He was very respected, a very respected figure for Val del Omar. He was a sort of a myth, a legend because he had been killed by Francoists. But I think that the book that we would highlight to a greater extent is the Escondida Senda by García Lorca, which is a beautiful book on the poetry of San Juan de la Cruz de Fray Luis de León. And I have a lot of things that I have underlined, that I have highlighted in that book. And I think that this book by Francisco García Lorca should be published and mixed with all the parts of the book that Val del Omar underlined and highlighted in that book. And this happened in the last years of his life. He was not, well, he was a kind man in terms of dialectics. He had that school of admirers, and he had his innocent joints that he smoked, and there was some joy of life in his life back then. He maybe wanted to marry that young woman, maybe, because people would marry more often back then. But, but the approach of young people to Val del Omar and that pilgrimage to this lab, and that's some sort of a disappointment due to the fact that he was not able to reach some goals in his life. And so maybe this is connected to the world and also to the contributions that future would bring. Computing, laser, a lot of new technologies. So when you say that this was a very happy time, these things are not talked about that much, but at the end of the day, money is very important. And the fact that Val del Omar could be, didn't have to worry about money, I think this enabled him to just do what he wanted, and it was a fruitful part of his life. One of the greatest legacies that you have preserved and then exhibited is the Plat Lab that we have set up this program about. And I think that it would be good to actually talk a little bit about that lysergic work by Val del Omar in the 70s. And Piluca, you have told us about that, also about how Val del Omar, that colorful Val del Omar, is less well known. So if you want us to, maybe we can tell us about the Plat also and what was done there. Well, as a matter of fact, after being a widow and with no family responsibilities and with a considerable group of admirers or a fan base, he settles down in a small room in the lab in the Illa de Arousa street. His bed was in a small part of the place, and then the rest of the lab was occupied by instruments, even his fridge. There were cinematographic, photographic instruments in his fridge. So this is, and he created something that we call La Truca, which is a mixing desk, a mixing board that he invented, a sort of mixing desk. And there was a screen, Fresnel screen, and then a camera, and then on the other side there is a projector, and in the middle there is a number of devices, like the one I'm going to tell you about later, bionic optics and the Plat projector. And he manages this, he handles this by using a number of business. He uses the box of business cards, and he sets up a controlling desk. And, this is the time of his life that I consider happiest because he was freer than ever. His daughters were very important, yes, for him probably, but at that time of his life, he was creating, he was sharing this creation with very young people. Nobody understood him during Franco regime. Nobody would understand what he said or we tried to express, and probably that's why he left him be. Just because if they had understood him, probably would have not allowed him to express all that. So with all these inventions and all these young people, this is when we get this sort of LSD, lysergic Val del Omar, with films that he cannot afford to film in 35 mils, so he uses Super 8. And he started experimenting with laser, video, and I think that one of the most beautiful parts of the Platt era, apart from collage, it's all the tetrakins and diakins that were painted by hand, like some that you're going to see soon, and that he maybe set up with seeds or with leaves from trees. Or, for example, he would use a nail polish or glue. So all of that creative part of it is, well, some sort of a process of learning for us. A lot of learning that we have taken from this. Maria Jose, Gonzalo, and I have been, seeing Val del Omar throughout this process as a filmmaker, and we wanted, therefore, to follow the path of cinema. And this is why being in this festival is something very joyful for us, and the fact that we have an experimental cinema is held is good because we can see him in his medium, but we have to define that thin line between contemporary world and the cinema, and probably the contemporary world is where Val del Omar has been recognized in the way that he deserves, because the cinema doesn't recognize him as the pioneer that he was. And one of the things that surprised me or that amazed me is this slides, these diakins that, well, I can tell you about whenever you want. Well, there are a lot of things that we would like to touch upon. But, if there is somebody who is not familiar with the figure of Val del Omar, it would be interesting to mention a number of publications that I think are important. There is a compilation of writings by Val del Omar that I find very crucial, to understand his work. Apart from theoretical writings explaining his ideas on cinema and technical issues regarding cinema, also there are poetry, because he wrote poetry that have been well edited or published. He wrote about beauty, and there was something that I would like to see published or published again, is Val del Omar Sin Fin, Endless Val del Omar, which I find to be a real jewel, and I think should be published again. I would kill for having one of these, because you can't find it anywhere. It's a publication including a lot of writings that can't be found anywhere else, graphic documents or materials. I think that almost all of them have been registered also in the filmographic archive in Madrid. I have some documents. Maybe they are expensive. Well, they need to be published again, in any case, I think, seriously. When we premiered your movie in the Festival of Venice, I brought 10 items, and that was in Pontecorvo back then, in Venice, and I took one for Pontecorvo, and the rest for the bookshops of the festival. They were sold out in one day. There were 9 items. So these copies we went to Geneva, where Anita still lives. Anita is another of the daughters of Val del Omar. So we went from Geneva to Venice with the 10 items, with the 10 copies, and they were very heavy in weight, I mean. But maybe we can reserve that for Elena, yes, one of those. Why not? Oh, no, well, I was just saying, yes. But there are other competitors, such as the Pompidou Museum, the Modern of Modern Art of New York, the Mombi of New York. Well, I don't know. That is another uncompleted, unfinished process. And maybe also translating into English many of his writings. That would be another thing that should be done. One of the books that I recommend to have a more agile idea and that is very well written and very well organized, apart from the one that you made for the Vasisi of Buenos Aires. You had the boldness of mixing Val del Omar's books with texts, with other texts. But in any case, there is a very important book that I use a lot, which is the book by Javier Ortiz Echagüe. It is a beautiful book, very easy to use, very useful, because you see, with this book that you can find in the Central Library, this is a very useful book, as I'm saying, and I have encouraged Javier, I always encourage Javier to make a book, to write a book with the footnotes. The footnotes by Javier are very important. He set up the texts in a magisterial way, and then he also added some footnotes that are very useful in terms of stimulating the reader. So I recommend this much more than the work that we did with Maria Jose, which is very nice from the graphic point of view, but maybe not that useful in terms of working with it. Well, Ortiz Echagüe has had the wisdom to mix 3 different areas in the books and the works of Val del Omar. And that's very interesting also. And maybe we should start to wrap up, because we could also start talking about the more than 60 patents created by Val del Omar and about a lot of inventions that we don't even have the time to start talking about. We could mention a lot of them. So maybe we should start to wrap up. By asking Piluca about what she has brought us as a present. This is bionic optics. It is an equipment that Val del Omar used to create effects on another film. You have the camera on one side, the projector on the other side, and then in the middle you get things happening. And these things happen with some equipment. Another one that is very well known is the Plat Tetra projector. This is the bionic optic, which is a slide projector for normal conventional slides. We bought it on the internet, very cheap. This is just a replica. The original ones are in the Reina Sofia Museum. This was made by Teodoro Ignoto, which is the person who restored the Val del Omar Plat Lab. So it's identical. It has a lens that spins in one direction, an anamorphic lens, and in turn, it has a filter here that can be exchanged. So from a fixed image, if you want, we can try it. From a fixed image, Val del Omar creates a moving image that well, lasts a while till it, I mean, it takes a long time to get the same again, to become the same sound again. So we can try and try it now. I don't think we need to change tables. Let's see if we can. Is it high enough? Maybe Juanma can give us a hand with this and we can do a test. Are the lights in the machine already? They are. And maybe we should turn off the lights to see it better. I would just like to say something to try and understand what bionic optics is. Just on the one hand, we have image sources, a number of slide projectors that are aligned to have a concentration of the images in one screen. It's like layers, analogical layers, being projected on a Fresnel screen, and from the posterior side of it, the back side of it, he refilmed all of that to obtain all the effects of this part of his life when he used to work with Super 8. I brought 6 slides. I'm going to show them with this filter, and then I'm going to use another filter, and I'm going to show the same 6 slides for you to see the difference. So maybe we can turn off the lights, all of them. Thank you. That's great. They are hand-painted on glass with varnish or nail polish, with nail varnish. You've got the one with the seeds, Beluca. Yes, opium seeds. I don't know what he used that for. It's funny because many of the inventions by Del Omar are related to the interpretation of the projection itself. Many of them analyze or focus on the light of projectors and images and distort it. This is also hand-painted. I love this one, I have to say. I have a question. These images are projected on other images. Yes, this is what we could call a machine to create special effects or credits. This would be our intermediate screen, and VAL DEL OMAR would be behind it, refilming it in order to obtain the master with all the layers. These are the seeds that Gonzalo was asking for. Let me clarify that the Fresnel screen is a richer projection screen. This is a way to generate effects on the film. So it's a form of art that is unnamed yet. Maybe we can call it VAL del Humor, VAL del Humor, or VAL del Omaradas, like things done by VAL del Omar, or VAL del Humor with that pun with humor and the name of the artist. There are a lot of Super 8 rolls that have been seen yet, where you can see all of this beauty. Okay, we're starting to talk about interesting things. Where are these rolls? They should be in the Reina Sofia Museum or in Filmoteca, maybe. Everything that was left in the VAL DEL OMAR lab was left to Filmoteca before the beginning of the pandemic, in the summer before the pandemic, before the lockdown. Well, Tito is telling me that, well, Jacobs and the Mirror program that we're presenting this afternoon, the cinema as an element, and the issue is that in Ken Jacobs brought us his Magic Lantern, which is a performance that he's been working with for a long time now, which was not very different from this bionic cyclotactile optic. The connections between these things are quite impressive, when in theory they had no connections. And I would like to remind you that 8:30 today we have the Mira program with movies by Ken Jacobs and other filmmakers such as the Colectivo de los Ingrávidos, Valentina Alvarado, and they're going to be very interesting too. The lens spins. There is a small engine. Maybe is it similar to a zoom optic? Well, I'm not sure. This is the only one I know. The bionic zoom. There might be some more that have not been preserved. I don't know. Have you got more filters? Yes, this is what I was going to do now. I've got more filters. I'm going to show you the same 6 slides with a different filter. This looks like a brain. Now we're going to see other slides with these new filters.
Que por cierto me encanta el nombre de Teodoro Ignoto.
I love that name, Teodoro Ignoto, that you have mentioned earlier today, because Ignoto is an artistic name. Ignoto means something like unknown, undiscovered, uncharted. I think he's originally from Greece, as far as I know. But yeah, I love the name also. Teodoro Ignoto. I think we can revert it now. I was trying to revert it, not to see it the other way around. Do you mean rewind it totally?
Espera. Espera, que me salta una. Me ilumina alguien con un móvil.
Sorry, I think I skipped one. Can you give me some light with a mobile phone or something like that?
Ya está, muchas gracias.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's it.
Entonces, es otras diapositivas.
So, I've got other slides.
Había sido proyeccionista en mi vida, yo.
Yeah. I couldn't be a projectionist myself, could I? Look at me. I'm useless as a projectionist.
Que parece un asteroide.
¿Qué parece?
Un asteroide.
Sí.
That looks like an asteroid or some sort of a bug.
Aquí parece una verdura.
It looks like some sort of a vegetable to me.
Ah, bueno, esta me encanta con este filtro.
I love this one with this filter. I love it. Beautiful. Yeah, it's some sort of a Japanese style, isn't it? The one in red, I love that one. Lovely. Beautiful.
Y la labor de reconstruir todos
And
estos
what about
aparatos
the
ha
work
sido
of
también
rebuilding, restoring all of these devices? That's been hard. Well, yes, we've had the cooperation of the Reina Sofia Museum. When the plot is set up in the museum, and they make some replicas, just not to overload the original devices. And also they restore all of the machines, almost all of them. And it was a great idea. You know, we have an agreement with the Max Estrella Gallery also. So these bionic optics that we actually had the opportunity to meet Teodoro Ignoto due to his work in the Reina Sofia Museum. So the gallery thought about creating some replicas of this equipment to try and show the slides and the fact that VAL del Omar has a presence in events such as Arco or Armory, in spite of the fact that we're not selling his work, because these are replicas and this is an edition of this. For example, in the Armor Show in New York, before the pandemic, there was none this year, we met Barbara Miller, who is the museum, who is the director of the Museum of Moving Image, and this meant that an institution such as the Warhol Foundation is sponsoring a big exhibition on VAL del Omar, which is going to be inaugurated or opened in the fall of 2022, and this is going to be the arrival of VAL del Omar to New York, which makes us very happy, Gonzalo and I, because we're talking about an internationalization, and in cooperation with such important institutions, this is great news. And well, the artist has been in contemporary art trade fairs or events. Yes, there is more recognition in the field of contemporary art than in the field of cinema. And this is why, well, we have tried to establish those connections and foster them. This is another one that I love, this one with this filter. All of this optic thing and all these devices developed in the Platt in the 70s. Something special about them is they was working as second-hand equipment, third-hand equipment, and it was some sort of a do-it-yourself activity. And this is important also because all of this culture of remix arrived a little bit later. So when you saw the original installations of his machines, they were a little bit precarious, weren't they? This one is beautiful with this filter. Sorry, Victor. No, it's okay, no worries. This is really beautiful. I love it. VAL del Omar used the Ferretería Europa for his works, which is in A Coruña, which is near to Cuatro Caminos Street. And he would, you see, get a lot of material from these hardware stores, all types of tools, all type of bolts, screws, fasteners. So he used this hardware store as a source for his techniques. I love this one too. Well, I love all of them actually. There is a third filter. I don't know if you want to see it too. That's my less favorite one though, but if you want to see it, we can, of course. And then there's something that VAL del Omar loved also, just like you're seeing now, the distortion of the original light. He liked to interpret each of his cinema exhibitions, his film exhibitions, in a way that each was a unique exhibition. Yes, he was the interpreter. He was like a musician in that regard. He was the composer and also the player of the music. He would play the music too. For example, for the diaphonic effects, in Berlin, for example, that was like a real adventure. We were about to fight the projection technicians. They were asking for plans, and Val del Omar said that the plans were actually in his head, and the German projectionist said that without that they couldn't project that, and Val del Omar said, okay, we're off then, we're going. And they said, oh, that's okay. And in the end, they did it the way he wanted to be done. In Cannes, the same thing happened with some of the technique. He had a special device to implement this technique, this overflow, this outpouring technique. So this outpouring was amazing over the heads of the audience on the ceiling. But he was the one implementing that. So he didn't like other people to actually project his films. And we can see there also the spirit of expanding cinema, where the artist is also a performer. Yes, because he knew the moment for overflowing, outpouring, just like composers know what is the moment to overflow the room with sound. For example, Bela Bartok or Shostakovich or Stravinsky, they know very well what are the ideal moments for overflowing the room with sound. So the same thing we can say of Val del Omar. We can show this more slowly, but I like this effect when it moves a bit faster. What about those interpretations or performances by Val del Omar? Maybe Gonzalo, Victor can tell us about this. Was there sound also? Were they performed with sound live? Well, not sure. As far as I know, there was no public exhibition of this. This is something he did privately in his lab or for his friends. So this is something that dates back to the late 70s. Have you told them about that painting by Goya with the naked woman, La Maja Desnuda? There was a precedent to this in Castilla. The dialogue that I had with Val del Omar, I was a bit bold sometimes. I was young and I was a bit cheeky, just like young people are. So I asked, why do you want to do this in the Santa Ana, which is a lady, was very dramatic. Why don't you do it in the La Magdalena, which has a body that is similar to a snake, with that clothes that she has, that you can see her body behind it. And he looked at me with fear in his eyes, because you see, it was that taboo, that embarrassment. And I would say that would have been done on the body of the Magdalena, which is also in the Museum of Sculpture of Valladolid. But he didn't do that. Santana enabled him to focus on issues with microlenses. The lips of the saint, the eyelids, it was much more intimistic. And as for the nude Maja, the naked Maja, as one of those slides he showed to his friends, and sometimes he would exhibit, would show us things related to paintings by El Greco, and I asked him about the nude maja. And one day he did it for me, he showed it for me, and the nude maja started to move as if she had just awakened from a long-lasting dream. And, well, it was very interesting, that effect, that was very interesting. It was very interesting with that nude painting. We've not found the slide with the nude maja. Well, there was the ones of El Prado, so he hadn't painted them. I think we do have them, yes, somewhere. Okay, I'll have to start breaking the magic because we are running out of time. So, well, it's a shame, but well, this has been a real present. This is beautiful. So a million thanks to Piluca for this. Well, it was worth bringing this in the plane and, you see, carrying it on the plane because you liked it. So that was great.
Y bueno, como última guindita final, os queríamos poner aquí.
And now the icing on the cake is going to be the trailer of the program we have prepared online regarding the Plat Lab, for you to see some indication of what is going to be done. Piluca, Victor, and Gonzalo are going to take part in the program also. I have to find the button to be able to disconnect this. So now we're going to see the trailer of the program that we have done online, for the program online, as some sort of an invitation for you to see, because probably those of you who have not seen or didn't know Val del Omar will have the chance to get to know him better. This is on the internet, right? Yes, sitecinema.com, online program. There you can find it. And also regarding the program for today, we have the elementary trip of Spain in the Filmoteca de Galicia. The cinema as an element in this room around 8:30. So, shall we see the trailer? Yeah, definitely. I prefer the large screen. Well, this is just a trailer, really, but it's a 1 minute long trailer. So let's see it. Let's watch it.
Viene a ser una síntesis de todas sus técnicas. Va más allá del cine.
It's a synthesis of all his techniques. It goes beyond cinema. The works of Val del Omar are
para mí una de las conclusiones que he tenido después de pasar años, ¿no? Un poco investigándolo y teniendo la suerte de conocerlos entre sus obras de su obra y su vida, es una personalidad que nunca deja de sorprender.
Todo lo que es el Val del Omar en color, el Val del Omar un poco lisérgico, un poco del Plat.
Val del Omar, colorful Val del Omar, the Plat Lab, Val del Omar. I think this is the more Val del Omar part of his life, the more authentic part of his life, the more genuine part of his life. All those films that were aiming to be filters or effects, but that are in itself masterpieces. They're hand-painted, made with glue, with real leaves. And the effects that this generates in the films are incredible, so they are a masterpiece in themselves. Val del Omar is something that, the work of Del Omar is something that becomes the quintessential part of art, the fifth element.
Bueno, pues gracias, Piluca,
Okay,
Gonzalo,
thank you,
Victor,
Piluca, Gonzalo, and Victor, and thank you to all of you for being here.
sigamos disfrutando de
That's it. Let's continue enjoying Val del Omar and the festival. Thank you very much, Elena.